All right, kiddos, lucky ducky you guys got a snow day, but we have to stay on track, especially since I will be gone still all of next week. So I've recorded the lesson for Friday, making a couple adjustments. So please do the following bell work. Your Isaiah in depth, you're obviously going to have to do this when you get back to school and you have your Bible, but I will still be expecting this in your bell work. When you're ready, move to the next slide. All right, so the other day we learned about Jeremiah. We didn't quite get to finish reading the stuff about Jeremiah. So I will make sure that all of those readings are in our OneNote as well, so you can get a chance to look at and familiarize yourself with the story of Jeremiah. So Isaiah is the other major prophet that we're going to talk about for this unit. Isaiah actually is constructed of 3 prophets together in one book. So the first chunk of Isaiah is a pre-exilic prophet, and he actually is who Isaiah, the writer, is. So the first chunk of the book, pre-exile, there is a man actually writing his prophecy called Isaiah. Then we get who's called second Isaiah, which is a prophet during the exile who is writing in the tradition of Isaiah. He's going to call himself or refer to himself as Isaiah as a way of honoring what Isaiah has done before the exile. So he'll still be referred to as Isaiah, but he's clearly a distinctive new figure. Similarly, third Isaiah is also written in the tradition of the original Isaiah, but this is post-exile. So the tradition of Isaiah and how he writes and his style still exists through the exile into after the exile. So he's going to be writing to people after the exile in the tradition of Isaiah. So I guess the big point here is that there's one book called the Book of Isaiah, but technically there's 3 different time periods and 3 different prophets writing, all in a very similar style, but it's clear that they're writing at different times and that they're distinctive people, even though we call it all Isaiah. So, who is this first Isaiah, this true Isaiah? Well, he is really focused on challenging them. So he's also in the south. He's also a southern kingdom major writing prophet, pre-exilic. He is writing to challenge them in Jerusalem. And so this takes place in the first 40 chapters of Isaiah. He really is focused on the fact that the people, the Israelites, or technically the Judites, right, are not being just between the rich and the poor. There is a huge disparity between the rich and the poor, and they are not caring for the poor in their community, which is part of what God calls them to. He also tells of the coming Emmanuel, and Emmanuel is a fancy word meaning God with us. You might notice if there will be well, I don't know if I'll put a link in, but if you wanted to, you could listen to O Come, Emmanuel, which is a Christmas song. Yay, snow, Christmas. And the lyrics, actually I'll put the lyrics in there. The lyrics show clearly that they're rooted in 1st Isaiah, but we can see how they're tied to this coming Jesus, or how they're interpreted that way in the future. But Emmanuel is one of your vocab words. It's a very important word, and it means God with us. He also tells them that there's going to be disaster if they don't figure it out. There's going to be something like the Assyrians attacking, but for the south. So he's kind of warning them of this potential exile if they don't get it right. But he does offer hope, just like all the prophets, right? They say, get your act together, and God will deliver you, and it will be okay. Just for some context of what we know about Isaiah, this first Isaiah he is very well written, so he's very educated. It's very clear in the way that he writes that he's educated, he's wealthy. And Isaiah as a book overall is very poetic. So you're going to get a chance to look at some excerpts from Isaiah and his very poetic writing. So when you think Isaiah, think poetry. Second Isaiah, again, this is during the exile, so this is a different time period, than first Isaiah, but still in that tradition. He's going to encourage the people because they're in exile. And we see this for the next 15 chapters. This is 2nd Isaiah writing. He will foretell that Babylon will fall, that they will be saved from their exile. That is a very hopeful and encouraging message to people that are facing exile. He will also talk a lot about this suffering servant. So there's a section of 2nd Isaiah called the Suffering Servant Songs. And it is basically the section that tells the story of this man, this innocent man, this suffering servant who takes on the suffering of his entire people, though he is innocent, and through his suffering, he redeems the people. The people are saved through his suffering, even though he is innocent and not deserving of the suffering that happens. And we actually see a lot of connections between the suffering servant songs and what we find in the story of Jesus' passion, which is the story of Jesus' persecution and death on the cross. And you see a lot of parallels between the two, and it's often thought that there are lots of references in the Gospels back to the story in 2nd Isaiah, these songs, these poetic songs, making that connection that Jesus is this innocent man who suffers for the people. That is also another one of your vocab words I want to point out, the suffering servant songs. So 3rd Isaiah is after the exile. So again, same lineage, same kind of style, but after the exile. So he's trying to give them some direction as they're coming back because they need some direction. Right? They've just lived a life of exile and they have to figure out how to rebuild. So this is the last 10 chapters or so. So he's going to remind them, we just got out of exile. Let's not do what we did to get ourselves into exile. Let's make sure we're taking care of the poor. Let's make sure we're living a life of justice. Let's make sure that we're not worshiping other gods, because we know time and time again that that gets us in big trouble. Again, he'll remind them as they're rebuilding their lives to create a culture, a society, a structure of justice built in. So to make sure that that is at the forefront as they're rebuilding their lives. And he will praise those who are doing a good job of glorifying and praising God, because that is ultimately the goal, right? Is to be just people, to love God with all our heart, mind, and soul, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. So to have the justice piece for our neighbor and the monotheistic piece for God. So we were going to do an activity with our partner. We can't do that since you guys don't have class time and you don't have partners. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to have the excerpt with passages from 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Isaiah in our OneNote, and it will be titled that. So I want you to take an opportunity for yourself to go through and look at each of the Isaiah 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and kind of look at what is the tone, what are the words that are supporting that, and how do those messages come across. You should be able to differentiate between 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, even if I didn't separate them out for you. So I want you to make sure that you're capable of doing that and seeing the differences and their distinctive messages, but also paying attention to the overall poetry of Isaiah. So again, Isaiah is very poetic, but each prophet, Isaiah 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, have their own messages. So you should be able to differentiate between those messages, because I'm probably going to ask you something about their distinctive messages. So just some reminders, we will still be having our mini celebration on Tuesday, which will be kind of a recap of just generally the prophets and these 3 that we've talked about, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. So make sure that you're going back in your notes. There will be a little mini review on Monday, along with a tiny bit of more learning. Also, a heads up, a reminder, your service reflection and printout are due on Wednesday. So that printout should be in your OneNote, and the service reflection should be on turnitin.com. The reflection prompt, if for some reason you have forgotten, is in our content library in the service tab. If there's extra time after your mini test, I've already informed our substitute that you have time in class after the mini test to work on your service reflection quietly as other people finish up, and making sure that gets in. So please make sure that is done. Have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you when I get back. Enjoy the other videos that are to come.